Bring in our panel again. Annika Green, former speechwriter for President George W. Bush, and David Carlucci, former New York State Senator. David, if I could start with you, I want to get both your thoughts on the issue of transparency first. David, do you think there is a case that more images and details about particularly the September the 2nd strike should be released?
Absolutely. Look, this is extremely problematic for many reasons. Good questions to your previous guest. And he's answering, look, yeah, the administration, this is a wink and a nod, because we know fentanyl that has killed tens of thousands of Americans has not been linked to Venezuela. That is the problem. So this is a wink and a nod from the administration. They're putting out headlines, but not giving us details. And this is not just about our own government, but it's about trust around the world. People are looking at this very concerned, and even ourselves here, everyday Americans are scratching their heads and saying, what's going on? And the Trump administration, all they can say is it's drugs, and drugs are killing Americans. Yes, that's true. But if that is what you're trying to do, you're going about it at the wrong places. So it's extremely disturbing. And more details need to come forward and tell us exactly what are you doing, or at least tell our elected officials here in the United States what is the plan and why is this happening.
OK, Annika, I just want to bring you in. Leaving aside the politics and the policy, we will get to that. But just on the issue of transparency first, would you like more images, details and information to be out there?
I think that at this point that would muddy the waters, no pun intended. I think it's very good that briefings are happening on the Hill. I think it's very good that accountability is happening, right? When you have one party control of both houses and the White House, the danger is that potentially there's complacency and there's not as much review. And yet at the same time, Trump has illustrated that he is taking these things so seriously that he's doing things previous presidents haven't done, such as designated drug cartels as foreign agents, as terrorist groups, so to allow there to be a process for taking them on in a more direct way. And I know the previous guest was saying that Americans are sort of split on support. The two polls that I saw show that every poll, either 71% or 51%, still a majority support doing something. But the question is, relevantly, what is the due process? And that becomes complicated. What was the due process for the United States taking out Osama bin Laden? He wasn't brought before a court system, but I don't know that many people are against what happened to him. So that's some of these thorny questions we have to answer. Or when President Obama authorized the killing by drone of people who ended up being American citizens who were members of terrorist groups overseas. These are things that we have to answer.
But it was well documented. We knew who Osama bin Laden was. We don't know who these people on these boats are. And of course, when we ask Americans in a poll, they will come back.
Just because we on this panel don't know who they are doesn't mean that there isn't intelligence, as you were saying, that is classified. And that is why the briefing on the Hill is important, that people with those clearances can review this and be another set of eyes on who are these people, what is the evidence for these attacks.
Right, and that's what we're lacking right now. We don't have that.
Well, we don't have it in the media. That would not provide clarity.
And our highest ranking elected officials don't have it as well. They're very concerned about this, and they're not going to.
I think that is the issue, guys, isn't it, that we've heard from Republicans and Democrats. They just feel they're not being kept in the loop by this administration in the same way, perhaps, that they would have been in past administrations of both parties. But Annika, I just wanted to put to you something that Senator Lindsey Graham said a bit earlier today. And he said, if this is about regime change, if the Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro is still standing at the end of this operation, he said it would be basically a disaster for the US standing in the world, that it would have gone to these efforts and not affected regime change. What do you say to his view?
Well, Senator Graham has been one of those. He was actually famously known for standing with former Senator John McCain, who was highly respected, but also known as a bit of a maverick, one of these senators who would speak out and isn't going to just toe the line. And Senator Graham has been on the military committees and, you know, has a good reason for that view. But at the same time, we've seen what happens when the United States engages with regime change. I worked for President George W. Bush. At the time, we thought that these were the right decisions to make in Iraq and Afghanistan. And now all these years later, seeing that Afghanistan, for example, we may talk about this later, is now on the list of places we won't even take people from. So these decisions have longer running implications. But again, it is good that the Trump administration officials are going to the Hill and giving that information to members of Congress, and it's good for members of Congress to demand it.
Okay, and we will be talking a little bit later about those additional countries that have been added to that visa block list, as you mentioned there, Annika. And indeed, as Secretary Hegseth said, they are intending to play that video for some of the members tomorrow. So perhaps we'll learn a little bit more there. Do stay with us because we've lots more to talk about. Annika and David, and you at home, around the world and across the UK. This is BBC News.